Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be talking about the Levi's care tag, its introduction, its evolution, and how you can use the information on it to determine the age of your Levi's. Let's get into it. So in 1967, it became U.S. law that garment makers had to include washing instructions on the garment itself. Many companies were doing this previously and prior to this moment, but some were not. Levi's was actually printing that information on the pocket bag of their jeans just prior to 1967. So it stands to reason that if you have a pair of jeans that have the washing instructions printed on a pocket bag on the jean, you probably have a pretty old and pretty valuable pair of jeans. So after 1967, Levi's introduced a small little paper tag that was sewn in on the left side of the garment underneath the pocket bag or along the seam with the pocket bag, and it had all the washing instructions, and on the other side had a bunch of different information, mostly in the form of random numbers. And this version of the care tag lasted from about 1967 to 1983 or 84. And I say approximately because with almost all things Levi's, there's no absolute dates for most things, and that has to do mostly because when you're manufacturing things, you manufacture until the supply of the thing that you were using previously runs out. So one factory may have been ahead of the style change than the one somewhere else that was behind and had to use those materials for a number of years later. Now let us say around the mid-80s, Levi's changed their care tags from the original design to this specific design. It was a much larger tag. There was no branding, but it had all the same information, albeit with a lot more white space, but it had all the same information. But this tag only lasted a few years. By 1987, Levi's added the red batwing logo branding to their care tag. Still had a lot of the same information, but was a different design. Now, after about 3 years or so of this care tag being the primary tag, Levi's added a black version of this tag, and these two tags ran concurrently. The black tag ran all the way into the early 2000s. The red version actually lasted into the mid-90s, where it was replaced by another tag. So in the early 90s, the red version of this tag was primarily used for the 501. So when Levi's replaced the red version, it was only replaced on the 501. And they gave the 501 a new care tag that looked like this. Lots of the same information, quite a bit bigger, with a heavier material. And this tag would last into the early 2000s as well. And after about 2000, 2003, Levi's made big changes to all of their materials inside. Some would say for the worst. And now, these days, you have care tags that are basically a small book. So to quickly summarize the timeline, you have the proto care tag era with it printed on the pocket bag. But after 1967, you had a small white tag that lasted to about 1983-84, which was replaced with a larger white tag. And then in 1987, that tag was replaced by a branded red version of the Batwing logo tag. Then in the early 90s, a black version was introduced alongside that red tag. And then in the mid-90s, the red tags on the 501s were replaced with a thicker, heavier red tag version. And all of these tags ended their lifespan in the early 2000s. And the replacement of those tags is actually convenient for us to some degree at this moment in history because it's approximately 20 years ago. And for clothing to be considered vintage, it has to be at least 20 years old by most people's standards. So it stands to reason that if you have any of those tags on your pairs of jeans, you have a vintage pair of jeans. Now the tags get quite a bit more specific on date than that. So let's take a look at that information. So taking a look at these tags, of course, on the front you see care information, approximate shrinkage after being washed, size, etc., where it was made. But on the back side, you have a bunch of numbers. These numbers actually mean something. Let's talk about the numbers and what they do mean. The first number of note is the one that's probably the most apparent to everyone, and that is the lot number. Whether it's a 501, 505, 517, that number is fairly easily noticed in this hodgepodge of numbers. And in some cases, the lot number is by itself, just the 501 or just the 517. Typically that is for earlier pairs of jeans. Later on, as Levi's would introduce more and more different variations of denim, Levi's added a denim or wash code to that lot number. Largely that number is fairly irrelevant except for a couple cases, like the case of the 0217 code for the denim code, and that was to specify Sanfordized or pre-shrunk denim. Prior to Levi's introducing pre-shrunk denim, all the jean material was raw, which means it shrank to fit. And when Levi's introduced the pre-shrunk denim, Levi's denoted it with the wash code 0217. Sometimes there are two other digits in front of the lot number. I actually don't know what that means, so if you know, let me know. But as far as I can tell, it's largely irrelevant to dating your jeans. The next code of note is the factory code. Factory codes came in 1 digits, 2 digits, and 3 digits. The most common nowadays being 3 digits. Some of the earlier versions had 1 digit, like the number 6. And that would have been representative of an American factory. Or the 555 3-digit code, which was code for the Valencia, California, Levi's factory. These codes can actually be found also on the back side of the closure button on your pair of jeans. If it's a 501, it's going to be the top button, and all the other buttons should have it on the back side, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 stamps. Now the next set of numbers is the most relevant, and perhaps why you're here watching this video in the first place. So please take this moment to hit the like button if you enjoy this content. So let's talk about the date code. The date code comes in 2 digits, 3 digits, and 4-digit versions. Let's talk about the first two first, and then we'll talk about the second one. So the first two versions are truly just the same version because some months are 2-digit numbers. So when printed, you might see 10-7 versus 7-7. So looking at this care tag, you'll see the date code here. It says 10-7-6. But remember that 6 is the factory code. So all we're concerned with is the 10 and the 7. The 10 is the 10th month and the 7 is the 7th year. And here it gets a little bit more confusing, unfortunately, because this code could technically be for 1977 or 1987. How do we know the difference? Well, remember our timeline. If it was 1987, it should have a red batwing logo tag. And this is not a red batwing logo tag, so we know that this is in fact 1977. Most specifically, October 1977 is when this pair of Levi's was produced. Perhaps the most confusing scenario you have with this date code is trying to date jeans that are either late 80s or early 70s, because the tags are largely the same. You will have to use other methods of dating your jeans if you're in that situation. And you can find all that information in the eye above, because I have a bunch of series and a bunch of videos on that very subject. So thank God in 1993, Levi's introduced the 4-digit code that solved most of these problems. You can see here, it says 1295. Clearly 95 is 1995 and 12 is December. Thank goodness, because this solves a lot of issues with dating of the jeans. Now hopefully that made sense to you, because I know it can get a little confusing. Look at the back of a tag and there's just all these numbers strewn all over the place. But do realize that in all those tags there is a factory code, there is a date code, and there is a lot number, and oftentimes there is a denim code. So knowing that those codes are all probably present there will help you sort out which numbers are which, and they should happen in these formats. Now again, because there are no absolutes with Levi's, you may have to utilize other outside methods. Again, there are videos on my channel all about that. So I hope this was helpful. It can be confusing, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, or shoot me an email at loopfam1@gmail.com. I'll love to answer your questions. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.